We're waiting to return to Parliament House where the state dinner is in progress and the Prime Minister is to speak ahead of a speech from President Obama. We'll take you live there as soon as that begins. And before that, joining us in the studio is Brendon O'Connor. He's Associate Professor in American Politics at the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. Welcome to the program.
Happy to join you.
Well, this is such a quick visit. What impact, if any, is it going to have on the relationship?
Well, I suppose it tells us in Australia we haven't been forgotten. We can't expect American presidents to spend very long here. Obama cancelled twice because of domestic issues. So it's been an opportunity to talk about this issue of the placement of US troops in Australia. I think that's fairly significant. There's been discussions in APEC in Hawaii earlier this week, on the weekend, on a free trade agreement which would be around the Pacific Rim. That might continue on in Bali in the next couple of days. So I think there has been some fairly substantial issues rather than this just being one of those moments where we were a bit awestruck by the President.
So how does the alliance stand at the moment?
I think it's probably strengthened over the last 10 years. I think there was a time when US presidents didn't come to Australia. Out of the first 40 US presidents, only Lyndon Baines Johnson came to Australia. So up until 1991, we'd only had one presidential visit. It's now typical for most presidents to fit it in somewhere in their first term. So I think our relationship has strengthened. It's been more than just a Bush-Howard strengthening that we saw during the period of the Iraq War and afterwards. I think politicians of both parties have decided that this relationship is very much at the core of Australia's security, and I think public opinion is very strongly behind that. So I think Americans are probably taking Australia more seriously for a variety of reasons, some we need to be cautious about, than possibly ever before.
Well, you mentioned Bush and Howard. Former Prime Minister John Howard always made a great deal of the friendship that he had with George Bush and with America. How does that compare with, say, Julia Gillard's relationship with Obama and the US?
I've talked about there being maybe a Howard-Gillard approach to the alliance. That's one which says, OK, we're your friends, we're dependable allies, we're a buddy, and we're not going to lecture you about what we think should occur in our region or the world. Where there's maybe a Keating-Rudd approach, where they say, well, you only get the US president's ear very rarely, you put a big idea on the table, you come to it showing that Australia is a country of ideas. And I think those two approaches, I think, can have sort of mixed benefits. The softly approach can be seen as maybe rolling over too much, not being strident enough about our nation's interests. The Rudd-Keating approach can be seen as maybe lecturing a US president, which presidents maybe don't want to hear.
All right, so what do we make of the dynamic between Julia Gillard and Barack Obama? They seem very friendly. He, kissed her on both cheeks. I mean, it seems like they're sort of on the same page in many ways.
On one level, I think that is very positive, and I think they have quite a nice rapport. I think Gillard's joking with Obama in Hawaii was probably a side of her we haven't always seen since she's been Prime Minister. But I think we don't want to over-personalise these things. Alliances are country-to-country relationships. It's not really akin to dating. We need to, I think, step back from some of that and say it's glad that when Julia Gillard calls, Obama will be receptive. He'll know who she is. He'll have that bond already. But the alliance issue is much bigger than just two individuals. Right. And I suppose I fear that at times it can be over-personalised.
Right. But it is, I guess you would say, much more than just a military and political alliance. It seems to go much deeper than that. All of this talk of very strong friendship over the decades. Is there some kind of natural alliance there?
Yes, I think that's the really interesting part of it, this notion that shared values, shared languages, shared history in the Pacific War leads to a natural alliance. I think that is something we can get easily drawn into. I think it leads to this talk of a special relationship, which I suppose I'm to a degree sceptical about. I think there are things that bond the two countries together, but interests always need to be brought into this as well. What do they want from us and what will we hope to get from them?